Hi. So, today we're going to go over methods. In the previous lesson we went through them. And I figured I'd go through more detail on what they do. So, we'll wait for this to start up. And create our project here. So what we have here is, the first thing you ever see when you go here is you have your method called main. Now this method here is always called upon. It's your go-to method for everything. So your initialization code is always here. Always, always, always. You can make as many methods as you want, but this method is always going to be called by default. Always. So, let's make two other methods. We'll make one of type integer. And we'll make one of type string. So, we have two methods, one of type string and one of type string return. As you can see down here, the compiler is complaining that they don't return a value. So, this is the method here, this is a method here, and this is a method here. This one isn't complaining, these two are. This method isn't returning a value, these two are. Why is this? Well, the minute you say that you give the method a type, it has to return that type. When you give a method a type void, it means it's going to return nothing. It's just going to do what it wants. It's not going to return you anything. When you say, so if I say static integer return, what this is saying is, okay, I'm a method called integer return. But no matter what, I have agreed that I'm going to return you an integer. No matter what, I will give you an integer. I'll do some code and everything, do whatever the heck I want to do, but in the end, I'll give you an integer. Always. This is what I'm saying, I'll always give you an integer. Same with the string. Static string return. That's saying, I'm a string called string return. No, I'm a method called string return. And I am of type string. I will always return a string. No matter what I do or what code I execute, I can do whatever the heck I want. But no matter what, once I'm done what I need to do, I will give you a string. I'll return you a string. That's what it's saying. So when you do this, it has to return return the type that you made it. So this method integer return, it's of type integer. So it must always return an integer. No matter what, it will return an integer. So we'll do return at 0. And for this one, we'll do return no. Now, if we run this code, it opens up and closes. So we now have three methods here, but when we ran the program, it opened and closed. So remember, main, this here, this is our go-to method. Anything we want to do initially must be done through this method here, called main. No matter whatever you want to do, it has to start with this method called main. If you don't put any code here, you're You won't get anything done. So I'm going to make one more string. No, one more method. So we've made a method called doStuff. It's of type void, which says, okay, I'm a method called doStuff, and I'm of type void. This means I'm going to do whatever I want. I'll execute whatever code is inside me. I'll do whatever the heck I want, or whatever I need to do, and at the end of it, I'm not going to give you nothing. I'm not going to give you a string. I'm not going to give you an integer. I'm not going to give you a character. I'm not going to return anything. I'm just going to execute code. I'm not giving anything back to you. That's what it means to use a void. If you have, and again with these, the minute you tell it something, the minute you say it's of type integer, it's of type string, of type anything, you've written it to a contract saying, I'll execute whatever code I need to execute, do whatever I need to do, but no matter what, at the end of everything, in the end, you will get back what I promised to return to you. Be it a string, an integer, whatever. If I'm of type whatever you gave me, I will return the type that you told me I am. I have to, because I promised I would. Void isn't promising anything. It's just doing stuff. It does whatever. So that's why we call this one doStuff. You can name your methods and variables whatever the heck you want. But I called it doStuff because it kind of fits that. So, we're going to do doStuff. doStuff is a method that does absolutely nothing. So let's run our code. So we had a console window pop up, opened up and closed. So, what we did is we called the method called doStuff. When you call a method, it executes the code inside of it. And when it executes the code inside of it, it does exactly that. So, we called upon doStuff. We called the method doStuff. doStuff is going to execute whatever code's inside of it, which there is no code in it. So it's going to do absolutely nothing. Let's do console.writeLine. And we're going to say doStuff was called. So, the console window popped up, said, so what happened was, we called doStuff. The method doStuff calls console.writeLine and tells it to write this string here, which is doStuff was called. So, and then after it's done executing whatever it needed to do, the console closes because there's nothing more to do. And we're going to do a console.readLine. So, here's another thing we're going to go over. Console.writeLine and console.readLine. Console.readLine is a method. And readLine is a method of type string. Because readLine is a method of type string, it has promised that it will execute whatever code it needs to do and return you a string. Now, readLine has code inside of it that gets what the user typed into the console. So whatever the person typed into the console, it gets. Once it grabs what the person entered into the console, it returns the string back to doStuff. However, console.readLine also waits for the person to enter stuff. So console.readLine is a method that says, okay, I've been called upon. I'm going to wait. Okay, the person's typed in their stuff and pressed enter. Okay, now I'm going to return what that person entered, and it's up to you to store whatever I give back to you. So console.readLine returns a string. However, if you want it to be set to something, you'd have to be like int something is equal to this, so you can store it inside a variable. Of course, we don't want integer. Console.readLine returns a string. So string something is equal to console.readLine. So the value that readLine returns is given to something. So something is equal to what string? Something is equal to what readLine returns, which is what the user enters. However, we just want console.readLine. We don't care about the string it's returning. We just want it there because we know it's going to make the program not close right away. So we run it, and it says do stuff is called. Okay, so that's it. Do stuff is called. However, we have these two methods here that return two different things. Integer return returns 0, and string return returns a null string. But let's make this a little more variable. Let's introduce a new variable of type random, and we have to initialize it, make it equal to a new instance of random. So what we do here is, when you set something to a new instance of a class, this variable here inherits everything that random has. Now what random has is a bunch of different methods and properties, and random number gets those different methods and properties embedded inside of it, essentially. Like this here is a class. And so if we were to go to another program and access the class called program, you'd end up having to do program, whatever you want the variable to be called, is equal to new program. And that variable would have all the methods that class program has, which is do stuff, string return, and integer return. However, that wouldn't work so well with this console application because we're using static stuff. Normally, if you end up working with the WinForms application, you end up doing things like you wouldn't have static there. Another thing too is when you're making methods, so you'll normally have a private there. I forgot to put that there. So what this does is, at the moment, it's not something to be worried about. It doesn't do anything too significant for you at this point in time, because from the moment you have to start dealing with private methods and public methods, we'll be dealing with some complicated stuff. So let's do something with these two methods here. They're returning they're not being used. So we're going to do this. Integer return gave us plus so what the heck am I doing? Integer returned gave us plus integer return. What does that mean? So what we're saying here is write this string of text to the console with whatever integer return gives. So essentially what it tells integer return is, okay, integer return, I want you to execute your code and do whatever you need. You've promised me that you're going to give me an integer. So I don't know what your value you're going to have. I just know I want whatever. I want the integer you're going to give me back. So it says, so by doing this you're saying, okay, integer return, execute your code. I know you're also going to give me a value back. So I may as well treat you like a variable as well. Oh, whoops. Somehow got rid of that. So we're going to also do and return gave us when you're calling a method, you always have to put these parentheses here. Or no. Yeah, parentheses. So if we run this code, it's going to say integer return gave us 0 and string return gave us blank. You said that string return returns null, which means it returned a squat. So let's have it return something useful. Let's have it return cat. So integer return gave us 0 and string return gave us cat. Okay. So we made a new variable up here of type random. It's equal to a new instance of random, which means random number has a bunch of different properties and methods inside of it. It's inherited from the class random, essentially. So what we want to do is we're going to do random number dot next. So what we're saying is, okay, random number, inside of you, we know you have a method called next. So we're going to say, so it's basically saying, okay, you, random number, you know how to do this method. Here's my parameters for you, which are 1 in 700. So what this means, actually let's phrase that up. So we're saying, okay, random number, we know you have a method called next inside of you. Okay. Now, for your method called next, we want your method. We're going to give your method a minimum value of 1 and a maximum value of 10,000. And we want your method, we know your method is going to return us an integer between 1 and 10,000. Because your method that you have inside of you promised it would. So, I'll explain this again. Random number is equal to a new instance of random. So random number has a whole bunch of different methods that come from the class random. And a class is a structure of different methods and properties and whatever's inside of it. So, random number will display us whatever is inside the class of random. So we're saying, okay, random number, you have a method called next. So we want your method called next to give us a random number between 1 and 10,000. We know your method's going to give us an integer between 1 and 10,000 because you said you would give us one. Your method called next is of type integer. It will always return us a number between 1 and 10,000, or whatever we told you to pick a number between. But we know you'll always return us a number because you said you would. You promised you would. The minute you don't, everything's foobarred and we're going to completely crash and burn. You promised that you would return us an integer, so we're expecting that you'll give us an integer. So integer return will return a random number between 1 and 10,000. It's going to return whatever value the method called next gives us. Random number is just bridging us to that method that we want to use. Now, let's do something here. So, what I'm going to do here now is I've decided that I want string return to return random letters. I just want to give me random letters. So, how do I do this? I have the method called next return me an integer between 65 and 90. But this is something that's slightly confusing. Isn't random number.next going to return an integer? String return promises it's going to return a string. It never promised to return an integer. So why are you calling upon a method that will give you an integer? Why? Well, we're actually just using it as a stepping stone. If you see this here, we have the char in between parentheses. What this is a cast. The minute you put a type in parentheses like this, whatever it's in front of, it casts. So what this is saying is, okay, random number.next, you've returned me a number between 65 and 90. Now, I know you're an integer, but I'm going to turn you into your character equivalent. Because a character is actually an integer. A character is an integer in its own way. So the number 65 goes to the character A. 66 is a character of B. 67 is a character of C, etc., etc. So it turns this number into its character equivalent, because each letter is assigned to its own number. So it picks a random value between 65 and 90, and by casting it, we turn that number into its character equivalent, because every letter has a corresponding number to it. So when we run this, integer, it's gonna say integer return gave us 6055 and string return gave us E. So what it did is, the method called next returned a value between 65 and 90, which we casted as a character. So what this did is it turned it into its character equivalent. Each letter has its own corresponding number, so it turns that number into its corresponding character, which gave us a letter, a character. Now another question may arise. Our method string return returns a string. How is it that we can return something of type character, or convert it to type character? Well, we're still returning a string. Essentially what I've done here is, we have these two quotes here. Whenever you do double quotes, you're immediately saying, this is a string of characters. This is a string. And it's not a crime to add a character to a string, because a string is a string of characters. So by adding another character to a string, you just added an extra character to a string of characters. So that just makes the string one character bigger. So here we are returning a string. So I'll go over this again. Now I'm going to do a while loop here, just so the program goes on forever. So let's run our code here. So if you keep pressing enter, it's going to keep going on. If I let go of enter, it's stop. So let's go over this again. Our main method here starts up, executes its code, and what we're saying here is, while true is always true, so this will go on forever. Keep calling the method do stuff. So when you say that, it says you're saying, okay, do stuff, execute whatever code is inside of you. Okay. So do stuff executes whatever code's inside of it, which writes a line to the console with this string, plus it says, okay, integer return, execute whatever your code you need to do, or get, and give it back to me. I'm building a string here, so I need you to return me a value. An integer return. You promised you'd return me an integer, so it must be an integer, otherwise I'm going to scream and shout and complain. And then it goes, then it adds, once it's got its answer, once your integer return has returned its number, it goes here and adds this string, this to it. And then it goes to the method string return and says, okay, string return, I'm trying to build a string here. I want you to execute whatever code you need to execute, and I need you to return me a string. I need to finish this job, man. Just do your stuff and get me that string. So string return returns a random value, returns a random integer between 65 and 90, which gets turned to a character, which is then added to a string. So it returns a letter. So string return returns its string, and then once that's done, that's written to the console, and then console.readline's the next method called. and it waits for us to press enter for the program to close, for the program to finish executing. In which case, do stuff is finished doing what it needs to do, and the while loop we made, or we'll call do stuff all over again, forever. So yeah, that's just about everything I have to teach for this lesson, and I'll see you guys later.